Morning guys, Moorhuhn here. Today I want to talk about shield charge Warcry, like General's Cry shield charge. And today I want to talk about the very min-maxed version. I will go over the basics of the build very slightly, but I will show how specifically I try to maximize every single item and see how far I can push. In the end, I reached about 200 million or 40 million average hit damage, 200 million DPS under perfect conditions, so when all my timed buffs are up and everything, and about 50 to 100 mil of regular DPS. Like in the background you right now can see a test, like just a DPS test of a 5-way fight with 5 people inside the map, so 6 men HP. This video does not include a headhunter or inspired learnings or anything like that, so it's just purely the build doing the work. And honestly, it's quite impressive like how much damage this build can do in the end. The 5-way is kind of interesting because the amount of mobs makes my single target DPS a lot worse, which is noticeable when I sit in front of the boss for quite a while and the shield charges just go wherever and ignore the boss. But when the bosses are alone, I kill them near instantly. So let's talk a bit about the build overall. The General's Cry shield charge build is a very chill build that can map well and can boss very well. It is quite safe when decently equipped and has very little flaws. But we will talk about pros and cons in about a second. Overall, I prefer shield charge over shield crush. I have tried both and both variants are reasonable, and shield crush would be better if crit was in mind from the beginning. If I would have built the char purely for crit, shield crush would have been better in the end. But in the version I currently play, shield charge is superior to shield crush damage-wise. And I will explain that when we come to Gams specifically. Yeah, overall, the build works with General's Cry, summoning mirages of shield charge minions, which then just charge into the enemies and deal a shit ton of damage. For the clear we have impale explosions inside the build, and these provide very good addition to clear, which you can see in the background footage at times. Whenever I right click, these little explosions come around the enemies and the impales kill a lot of enemies. Then the build has a lot of temp buffs. It has a Warcry, it has Berserker, it has Focus. And all of these things can come together and buff the build immensely. They are not necessary all the time, but if you want to burst Maven in a single hit or something like that, you need all your buffs perfectly timed. Which in this version includes a Shock Focus helmet, and a Shock Focus but Shock Conflux helmet, which has a timed buff of 8 to 4 seconds, I believe. So it is up for 4 seconds and then down for 8 seconds or something like that, or 6 seconds. I don't believe anymore. I don't know anymore. I will check that out, or you will see it on the helmet. And yeah, all these buffs come together and obliterate pretty much anything with some decent investment of 100x and decent gear. You can inflict a 20 to 50% shock on even bosses like Cirrus or Maven. I am at the point where I always inflict a 50% shock on any boss in the game. When we take a depth 1k owl out of the question, any normal boss will receive the 50% shock. For movement we have shield charge and flame dash. Flame dash is a really nice addition because the first charge always is instant, and due to the alternate quality we get a lot of distance and can jump very far and move very quickly. The shield charge applies the Fortify buff pretty much at 20 stacks whenever, because we deal so much damage. Even with the normal shield charge, I have an average hit of a few 100,000s without impales. Let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of the build. Like, the pros of the build are, it has a fast clear, as you can see in the background. It has a very low budget to start with. Like, you can start it as a sort of self-found character just going through. But you need like 1, 2, 3, 4 uniques. So you can't league start with self-found, but yeah, in a normal league you could league start with this because the uniques you need are like available fairly early, and you could just play something similar in the meantime. The build is very good at bossing safely, because it can keep distance and just like run around the boss while the boss is dying because of your mirages. Overall, the build has kind of an auto-bomber feeling, which a lot of people like, so you just run around and everything around you dies and you don't really have to click a lot. So you'll sometimes use right-click for Call of Steel to just clear some enemies that are left over, or like explode a pack you just shield charged into. Later on for clearing, you don't even need your Warcry, you just shield charge into the pack and then everything explodes with right-click. Another thing I like is that it has an infinite amount of possibilities to upgrade the build. Like, you can pour as much currency into the build as you like. There's no real limit, and I will show what I mean with that in just a second at the gear discussions. So, but the build has a few downsides, of course. The first is the build cannot freeze. We play Brutality, which means we only deal physical damage, which means we cannot freeze, and a lot of people like freeze, and freeze is a very good defense mechanic, especially in Beyond maps, in Delirium maps and stuff like that. So this build is not great for like Beyond or double, triple, quadro Beyond Delirium maps, because of the second thing that is not great is corpse removal, and the third thing is low recovery against dot or prolonged fights. So in the end you will like just take too much damage in too short time periods in these Beyond maps, like to sustain against it, because you just don't have enough sustain for all that. Just doesn't work well. The next problem, or a problem but things some people don't like, is it is reliant on temporal buffs for the peak damage output. So for example, you need to time your buffs well, you need to see, okay, when is my Berserker up? Like for Maven it is important to see, okay, I'm in the brain phase, when do I activate my Berserk, when do I not, to try to skip phases and stuff like that. So you need to jiggle around a bit that and get used to how to play the build. And then the last thing some people might not like is you pretty much have to play without a sound, because the constant war crying is really annoying and it's getting old real fast if you're like playing on too high volume for the skill effects. So I would advise to like just listen to music or something when you play this build. Let's quickly dive into the budget, and after that we will take a look at the gear. For the budget, I would say you can just start this character as a league starter, and you don't need a lot of specific gear. And all the specific gear is very easy to come by. And you can get like you don't need it explicitly, but it helps a lot with convenience. I wouldn't play the build without corpse walkers, for example. Then at around 5x budget, or 1 to 5x budget, with the important pieces and then just filled up with rare gear, you can run red maps without much of a problem. Like normal red maps, tier 11 to tier 14 or something like that, no problem at all. At about 10x budget, you should be able to do all endgame bosses when you understand the mechanics. Like you still have like to understand the mechanics in the slightest at least. You need some knowledge about them. Then on a 10x budget you should be able to do all endgame boss fights aside from the Feared. And some of the other invitations might be difficult. At about 25x budget you should be able to do the Feared and all endgame bosses smoothly. It can still be sketchy with like difficult mods, so you should only do like the white or the very easy rolled versions on like a 25x budget. Of course it depends where the budget is, and yeah. But yeah. And then the last breakpoint I would say is at about 100x budget. When you pour about 100x into the build, you should be able to do all content smoothly, including difficulty ruled feared runs. Like you should have enough damage to just like DPS them down and not care about them all too much. Except when you roll like 5 defense modifiers and faster attacks and Maven heals them. That is unlucky, but well, shit happens. And yeah, the only thing you cannot really do with the build is Delirium and Simulacrums. You can do Simulacrums, and I've cleared a Simulacrum to wave 30, but it doesn't feel all that great because of the mentioned points. Then, yeah, this is pretty much about the budget. Let's take a look at the gear. So, the most important part of the build are the Corpse Walkers. The Corpse Walkers spawn corpses on the ground all the time, and this enables our Warcry to cast and spawn mirages which like act. Without this you have to desecrate or kill enemies first with something else, or like get some corpses around you to make this work. Then the second most important piece is the Dark Seer. The Dark Seer provides a lot of damage, a lot of health and mana, which is nice but not necessary, and gives the malediction buff or debuff when the enemies are blinded, which is pretty nice because you are blinding a lot of the time and you are blinded a lot of the time. But this is not as important because we have Second Sight. This comes from the Brutal Restraint, which is the third important unit. Brutal Restraint with Nasima as keynote gives the Second Sight, which says you are blind, blind does not affect your light radius. These are the two important lines for the normal version. The 25% more melee critical strike chance is really good when you're swapping over to crit, which I would not advise to, but I will get to that point later on. So let's take a look at what else I have used when I'm talking about Unix. I am using a Rislatas. The Rislatas is like the belt which gives the most damage by far for this build. There isn't really anything competitive to this, and when you go for damage you should use Rislatas. Try to get as much more physical and as little less minimum physical, and then, well, you know how to roll the Rislatas again. And yeah, you don't really need the enchantment except you go for crit, which I will explain later on. Then the second unit that is not mandatory but really good is Ashes of the Star. You should get one as quickly as possible. The quality to our skill games is the most important stat, and then reservation. So you want like as much reservation as you can get, but stay inside your budget. If you want a cheap Ashes of the Star, like 17 reservation, 28 quality will do the trick. You will just like not cap out as much. Then the third thing, the third unique I think is very important to the build, but not mandatory, is not the Bottle Faith, the Forbidden Taste. The Forbidden Taste, at the point where you have capped chaos resistances, is like one of the best flasks in the entire game. Because it is enchantable with use when you take a savage hit, and it will recover 100% of your life, which is insanely much because it is everything. So whenever you're taking 15% or more life in a single hit, you will instantly heal to full. This is really good while mapping and really good against bosses. Sometimes it is really annoying when doing the Feared, for example, because you don't want to use you don't want to play the Feared and don't know when your flasks go off. I mean, you can do that, but it can be tricky. So, yeah, the Forbidden Taste is a really nice flask as Auto Flask. Then we've got the Lion's Roar, which just adds a lot of damage, and the Bottle Faith, which adds a lot of damage as well, even in the non-crit variant. I actually noticed I don't have a really great one for crit, but yeah, whatever. The more important part is the Consecrated Ground damage, because that is one that is important for the main build, which is non-crit. Then let's take a look at the helmet. This one is not the budget version. You can use a crown of the inward eyes, the Cyrus helmet with 21% or 20% increased maximum life, mana and energy shield, with like either General's Cry +1 maximum number of merged warriors enchant, or the General's Cry has increased cooldown recovery speed enchant, which both are great enchants. I will talk about the enchants when I talk about my shield. Let's take a look at the last few uniques, which are jewels. We've got the Kitava's Teaching. Kitava's Teaching is very important to the build when you want decent recovery, because the Kitava's Teaching gives the Disciple of Kitava Keystone, which consumes corpses which recover life and mana. And you take more damage if you have consumed corpses recently, but that won't ever happen because you spawn corpses and consume corpses. So yeah, just ignore the second line here. It is important for recovery and a really good way to recover, which is great. Then we've got the Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flash with the Gorgama's War Herald, which buffs up our Ancestral War Chiefs even more. This is a very good. Like Forbidden Flash, it adds about 25 or 30% damage, I believe, something like that, which is a lot. And then we've got the Lord of the Steel. This is really good for clear. Like you want increased area and increased use speed. I don't have increased use speed perfectly here because I decided to take a double corrupted one later on with area and reservation efficiency. You don't need reservation efficiency, but the area one that was in the market just had it. So I took it. For the Call of Steel, you need any steel skill. So you can just use Splitting Steel at level 1 or any of the others, and it doesn't matter, just keep it at level 1 for the Call of Steel. And then this one adds really nicely to the speed of the character, like to the clear speed. Finally, we've got a Watcher's Eye with chance to deal double damage while using Pride and Impites. The inflict lasts longer while using Pride. The important thing is Impales, you inflict last 2 additional hits while using Pride. The other ones, like I don't use the conversion thing at all, and the double damage while using Pride is just nice on top, because we are stacking a lot of double damage. But yeah, this is very expensive, and just the 2 additional hits is not nearly as expensive. But let's take a look at the rares of the gear and like the core pieces, because the most important part of the character is a shield with a lot of armor, and you want a lot of armor. Like cheap shields start at around 2k, like at around 2.3k they start to get more expensive, and yeah, at some point you want the 2.8k shield, but that's like very expensive, where the prefixes only are about 15 to 20 exalts, like in the middle of the league, or even more early. But a shield with 2.6k will do the trick just fine. For the suffixes you want the increased Warcry cooldown recovery rate. This is a hunter mod and can be difficult to obtain. If you have like a low budget, I would advise to just get shields with like 2.3 to 2.6k armor and throw a hunter orb at them when they have an open suffix, and just hope for the Warcry cooldown recovery. If you do not have the cooldown recovery mod, which is sad but okay, then you should use the cooldown recovery helmet enchant, and only swap over to +1 maximum when you have a shield with recovery speed. Other good mods on it are double damage and double damage, because it doubles our damage, which is great. Then we've got the body. The body is the second most important piece of the character, and here we just want +2 our active skill games, so General's Cry and Divergent Shield Charge. And for this we can use like any combination. I only have, I actually have one left with plus strength and plus active. These are fairly cheap to build. You need like about 2 or 3 exalts to actually get like a strength and active skill games body armor together. You will have bad other mods, but like the +2 is very easy to make. The important part about the +2 is getting the skill charge to level 24. Because at level 24, when we take this skill out, we see we gain an added damage of 5 to 7 per 15 armor on the shield. At 24 it turns to 6 to 8, which is a huge increase. When we have a shield with like 2.8k armor or even 2.6k armor, it is a lot of damage. So getting the 24 shield charge is very important. And here's another thing while talking about shield charge. Divergent shield charge is where it's at. Divergent shield charge decides if the build is stronger with shield charge or stronger with shield crush. So in the beginning you will most likely play with shield crush because you need a level 21 version to reach level 24, and getting a divergent shield charge with level 21 is not as easy, especially early into the league. So you probably start out with shield crush and later on swap over to shield charge because they have the exact same breakpoint. The divergent shield charge adds more damage with hits and at maximum charge distance, which is pretty nice because shield charge and shield crush have the exact same numbers. Like at any level, both skills have the exact same numbers. The only difference is shield crush can hit twice and shield charge has 100% more damage and maximum charge distance. So with an Ashes of the Star and some plus quality and the 20 base quality, this is at 150% more damage with hits and maximum charge distance, which ends up being about 20% more damage than Shield Crush and having a nicer gameplay in my opinion, because I don't like Shield Crush. Then we've got, and again on the body, getting the critical strike chance, getting the body like this here is very, very difficult and expensive. You just want it like it looks here without the crit. You just want +1 strength, +1 active, and then something, just crafted life or something else. So this will be inside like a 5x budget, most likely, and rarely higher. You most often can buy them for like 2x 6 link ETH. So yeah, the body with +1 active, +1 strength is not as expensive as it looks. It gets expensive when you start to min-max, but I will get to min-maxing after showing the rest of my gear. So we take a look at the rings. The rings are just a lot of resistances, and in specific a lot of chaos resistance. Because you need to cap your chaos resistance, you need 75 for the Forbidden Taste. Or go with lower chaos resistance and then go with the Pantheon +40 chaos resistance against damage over time. You can do this. This will be like a nice budget variant when you cannot cap chaos resistance, but overall you want as much chaos resistance as possible. So that is why I crafted the chaos resistance here. The prefixes should look in the end like maximum life and then melee or area, like melee damage or area of effect, and crafted damage. The second ring can have like a vulnerability on hit. This ring in specific has chaos resistance, crit multi, and vulny on hit, which is like the perfect combination of the crit suffixes, but again very, very expensive to make. This ring was about 100x to create. Then we've got the helmet, which in this version is shocking conflux without elevation. I have a version with elevated shocking conflux but with only 32 int, and I later on swapped intelligence and accuracy around, so I have accuracy on the helmet and int on the ring, so I cannot use this helmet anymore. And to create the second variant I used non-elevated conflux because it was a lot cheaper and I still get my 50% shock. And because the elevation on shocking conflux does give 30% increased duration on enemies, which increases your potency of shock. So when you hit an enemy for like a certain threshold and would apply a 10% shock, the increased shock duration would increase that to a 13% shock. This is because the shock duration always is 2 seconds. This is not modifiable due to recent patches and changes to shock. But increased shock duration will increase the potency of the shock, so the shock will deal more damage or let you deal more damage. And then we've got elevated nearby enemies take increased physical damage and accuracy rating, and then prefixes with just life and something else. Like I wanted life and like area damage, but this one is extremely hard to get and I just lucked out on the first helmet. So I settled with just physical damage reduction while focused to get like something at least, together with my life roll. Then we've got the gloves. The gloves could have physical damage or impale, that's the elevated one, or just the impale, but the impale is important, and then Culling Strike. You can just throw together Culling Strike impale gloves and call it a day, craft life and be happy with it. Can min-max it further for like area of effect and something else. On my, I have elevated Culling Strike, elevated impale, and then tier 2 life, tier 1 chaos resistance, and damage with non-val skills during soul game prevention. And I just use like my Violence War Chief has 9 seconds of soul game prevention, so that's 9 seconds of 80% increased damage, which is a lot. So we've got these covered. Let's take a look at my jewels. I am using Mastery Jewels. I am using Force Multiplier, Iron Breaker, Master the Fundamentals for chance to deal double damage, Overwhelm Fist and just Fist damage, and Elemental Resistances because we don't really use a lot of Elemental Resistances on the gear. And then I've got Chaos Resistance on the small nodes. For the second large, looks pretty much exactly the same, but has Lightning Resistance instead of Chaos Resistance. For the medium clusters, I've got the exerted attack, medium cluster jewels with Rattling Bellow. All of my 4 cluster jewels have Rattling Bellow for the double damage. Then I've got 2 times Provocateur for the critical strike chance and multiplier. And I've got 1 Lead by Example for Onslaught and 1 Mob Mentality for charges. The Onslaught is very important to the belt because we gain 30% increased accuracy rating while you have Onslaught, which caps out my hit chance, which is very important. In the normal variant, you would just play Resolute Techniques and not care about accuracy at all. And then I've got 1 Crimson Jewel with just Global Fist, Crit multi, and max life. This is pretty difficult to get, so you can just settle with physical damage and some crit multi, or just life and crit multi or something. Just go with 3 stats. 4 stats is very difficult to make. Yeah, this much about my rares, I believe. Yep, and we've got the levels covered. Then let's take a look at my Ascendancy. For the Ascendancy, the most important part is the Warbringer node. This one provides us with a lot of rage and gives 50% more damage if a warrior has sacrificed rage recently, which is pretty much all the time. So we gain 50% more damage here, we gain 40% more damage here, we gain some rage here, and then Rite of the Ruin would give you more speed for your normal shield charge and like some more damage. But Rite of Ruin actually is a pretty bad node sadly for this build, and yeah, overall rage is not great. Like we need Warbringer, that's like the main reason why we are Berserker even, and Aspect of Carnage just adds a lot of damage. So sadly we don't benefit from rage a lot because the increased attack damage doesn't do all that much for us. We have nodes like Shield Mastery, which gives us 2% attack damage per 75 armor or evasion on shield, which is like so much. When we take a look at the path of building, and we take a look at the recharge increased damage, we are at about 600% increased damage. This was a lot more with the Resolute Techniques variant. The Resolute Techniques variant was at about 700 or 800, I believe, increased damage, which is like just so much that you don't really benefit from increased damage a lot. What was I talking about it? Oh, exactly, about rage. So that's why rage isn't all that great for the build. We take a look here at the tree. we would only gain a benefit of like 6% damage from the Rite of Rain. That's why you use Flawless Severity for the crit variant. For the non-crit variant you still would want Rite of Rain, but it's not great in the battling. Then we've got Nitugama War Herald, which just increases the effect of your ancestral totem with the flash things. I believe this is like the most important part. For the Brutal Restraint, this one gives a lot of dexterity, which is quite important. It sadly has no breakdown of much, but for dexterity on all the small nodes. Then I've got increased aura effect, cold resistance and dexterity, which all are important like to cap stats and like not care about certain things, because I need like a lot of dexterity for the precision aura, I need a lot of intelligence for the purity of elements and the enlightened support, and yeah, this means that I need certain stats and I want to do like as little on as I. One thing I forgot about the cluster jewels, we of course want resistances for the suffixes, like as much as possible, like all resistance cold res, all resistance cold res here. Then we've got all resistance chaos res and all resistance lightning res, and you just want to like get as much as possible there so that you don't need resistance to the rest of your gear. Of course, in the budget variant, when you don't have like insane rings, insane like other items, you will have some resistances here, which means your cluster jewels don't have to be like as min-max. I believe this is like the most important part of the Ascendancy and everything, of the gear, of the skill tree. Overall, I want to talk a little bit about the crit variant, because I was reaching about 100 mil DPS, or about, no, I actually was reaching about a 60 million DPS on the Resolute Techniques variant, and I felt capped out. Like I couldn't really improve the build further in a reasonable manner, so I could maybe squeeze like 5% damage somewhere or something, but like no reasonable numbers. So later on I decided, okay, I want to go crit and pure like as many exalts into the build as I have to. I played the build up to about 150x as Resolute Techniques, and yeah, needed about 500x to swap over to a reasonable crit variant, which is very expensive. If you want to play pure armor, that is. So, a quick overall like statement, the non-crit variant, in my opinion, is the better variant. It has about 1.5k life more, so you can reach like 6 to 7k life on the Resolute Techniques variant, and still reach like 60 million DPS if you invest a lot into the build. So overall, I would advise not to go crit, and if you go crit, don't go pure armor crit. You want to go hybrid armor evasion crit with a shield that gives about 1.3k armor and 300 evasion, I believe? No, which gives 1.3k evasion and 300 energy shield, because then you would play Shield Crush with the variant that gives critical strike multiplier per energy shield on the shield, and you would play the unique jewel that does the same and adds crit chance per intelligence on the shield, and this way you don't need like a crit chest, you don't need the bottled faith, you don't really need a lot of crit stuff to cap out crit, which is great. So, but this character is about the armor variant, so I won't really talk about the other variant. And overall, I actually don't really have anything to talk anymore. If you have any questions about the build or about the character, about how to craft certain items I am using on this build, I will link a few Reddit threads where I explained a few items and such. But overall, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and just, well, write down in the comments or wherever you find this video and let me know. Have a great night, and have a great day, and peace. Thanks for listening to this incredibly long video. See you!